Welcome to ITBS Media. This multiple choice questions and answer on web application security covering HTTP, HTTPS, methods, Bob suites, cookies, sessions, JWT, SOP, CORS, Authentication, Authorization, airbag, and IDOR are follow-up questions to test your ability after watching my videos on web application security. I have series of videos. As we proceed in these multiple choice questions and answers, you will see references to those videos that I have made on each topic or each topic area. And of course, your host on this channel is Dr. Ayo Adenuga. So let's go on into the first question. It is divided into sections to cover different aspects of web application security as you see on the screen. So sorry that this style 100 questions is actually 50 questions. My apologies for that. So a certification exam ready style 50 questions grouped by topic with answers clearly explained in the following slide. Okay, so section 1 is on web app fundamentals. So let's proceed. What is a web application? So you have the options here. What option will you select? All right, we'll proceed to the answer. The answer is a program. As C, option C, a program that runs on a server and is accessed through a web browser using HTTP/HTTPS. And to learn more about this, you have the video titled How Web Apps Work, HTTP, Request and Traffic Interception, right? You see it in our channel. If you go to the live section or the playlist, you will see it in the web security and network and web security playlist. All right, so we move on to the next question. Which protocol is used by browsers to communicate with web server? This is a follow-up question to question 1. What is your answer? The answer is C, HTTP or HTTPS. This back roll, you see the first question is a program that runs on a server and is accessed through a web browser using HTTP, using the protocol HTTP. Okay, and the second question here says which protocol is used, so it's HTTP or HTTPS. All right, question 3. Which component enforces same origin policy? Is it the server, database, browser, or firewall? The answer is the browser. Browser is the client. So To learn more about this, watch the video titled Same Origin Policy and CORS Explained, How Browser Enforces Web Security by Dr. Ayadenuga. Okay. So let's go to question 4. What makes HTTP stateless? What makes HTTP stateless? Is it because it encrypts data? Each request is independent? It uses cookies? It supports sessions? What is your best option? The answer is HTTP does not remember previous requests by default. So it means each request is independent. Okay, that's B. Each request is independent. So if you send one request and that goes to the server, that's a complete request. If you're sending another request, it's not like a prompt in AI, in a generative AI, that you can say, okay, I've sent this, then I will do a follow-up from what I have sent earlier, deduce this. No. Once you send that request it goes, and the response is returned. Okay, so we move on to question 5. How do web apps maintain user states? How do web apps maintain user states? Is it by IP addresses, cookie, sessions, tokens, DNS record, HTTP header only? The answer is B. State is maintained using cookies, session IDs, or tokens. And to learn about this, watch the video How Attackers Manipulate Cookies, Sessions, and Token Web App Security. Okay? Of course, IP address is not how web apps maintain the user state. It's not DNS record, and it's not HTTP header only. So we move on to question 6. What is an endpoint in a web application? So if you have web application, what is called an endpoint there? Is it a database table, a browser tab, a specific URL that processes requests, a firewall rule? What is your answer? The answer is C. An endpoint is a specific URL on a server that handles incoming HTTP requests, such as /login, /API, /users, or /others, /123. So if you have /login, you know that has to do with login. You have /API, /user, you know that has to do with user profile and things like that. Then if you have /other, /123, then it's talking about, it's referencing order. So it's not about, that one is not about login. It's not about login resources. It's not about user profile resources. It's about order. And for detail on that, you can watch the video explaining API vulnerabilities and penetration testing. And you can also watch demonstrating API penetration testing with OWASP Juice Shop, both in our channel here. Okay, so question number 7. Which component runs client side in a web application? Web application, client and server. So which component runs the client side? PHP, Python, JavaScript, SQL? What will be your option? The answer is what? JavaScript runs in the user's browser as the client side, while PHP, Python, and SQL are executed on the server. So note that. Question 8. Which component runs server side? Which component runs server side? We've talked about the client side, which is the browser. Now we're looking at the server side. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP. PHP is a server-side language used to process requests, interact with database, and generate responses. So the answer is PHP. Then number 9. Why should security never rely solely on client-side validation? Yeah, options. It is slow. B, it is encrypted. C, it can be bypassed by attackers. D, it uses cookies. So what is your option? C is the answer. Attackers can modify requests using tools like Bob Suite, bypassing all client-side checks. Security must be enforced at the server side, because when request is sent from the browser, it may be intercepted, and if it is intercepted, it can be modified and sent to the server. That is why security must be enforced at the server side, not at the client side, which is the browser. Number 10. What tool is commonly used to intercept and analyze web traffic? Nmap, Wireshark, Upsuite, Metasploit. Answer is Bob Suite. It is the standard tool for intercepting, modifying, and replaying HTTP or HTTPS traffic in web security testing. So if you're doing penetration testing and you're testing a website, you need Bob Suite. Nmap is not for intercepting traffic. It's for mapping traffic. It's for mapping ports, hosts, discovery, and others like that. Then Wireshark is that tool with which you can also do a bit of a intercept. It's not, but Bob Suite is what you can actually use to intercept and do a repeat when it comes to web traffic. not network traffic. So Wireshark is for network traffic. Bobsuit use it for web traffic. And Metasploit for creating payloads and things like that. So we move on to 11. Which elements are included in an HTTP request? Which elements? Cookies only, headers only, method, headers, and body, and D, HTML only. What is your best option? What is the right answer? Which elements are included in HTTP request? So the answer is header, body, and method. So an HTTP request include a method like get, post, header, and then optionally the body. So it depends on the type of method. Type of method will determine whether the request will have body or it will only have method and header. All right, so we move on to the next one, question 12. Which elements are included in an HTTP response? Which elements are included in an HTTP response? Only cookies, only headers, status code, headers, and body, JavaScript only. Which one is the correct answer? If you are familiar with HTTP header, either HTTP request or HTTP response, you should be able to answer this correctly. So let's go to the answer. The answer is C. Response includes status code like 200, 401, 403, 500, headers, and a response body. The response body could be HTML, could be JSON, it could be another format. So 13. Which OSI layer does HTTP belong to? Which OSI layer does HTTP belong to? Physical, network layer, transport layer, application layer. If you understand what layer the users normally interact with, then you should be able to get the answer right. HTTP operates at the application layer, providing services directly to user-facing applications like browsers. Okay, so the answer is D. Question number 14. In a RESTful APIs, what uniquely identifies a resource? Cookie, URL, session ID, authorization header. In a RESTful APIs, what uniquely identifies a resource? Cookie, URL, session ID, authorization header. I expect you to get this right because we have talked about it earlier. All right, let's see the answer. Each resource in REST is identified by a unique URL. It's called Uniform Resource Locator, URL, such as /API/user/42. So that points to user ID 42. So if you want to know, maybe you want to look at the profile of that particular user, this is the URL, the API that will point you to the resource of that user. So we go to question number 15. Which of the following is not a core component of a web application? Which of these is not a core component of a web application? Browser, web server, database, BIOS. So which of these is not a component of a web application? And the answer is D. BIOS is a hardware or firmware component and has no role in web application architecture. Okay. Look at the options there. Browser, obviously, the client, that's the client side of the application, of the web application. Web server, that is the back end. And database is where the resources are located. And the web server pull the resources needed from the database. Okay. Section 2, HTTP versus HTTPS. We're joining into the difference between these two now. Okay. What does HTTPS add to HTTP? If you have HTTP, what does HTTPS add to it that make it HTTPS? Another way you can ask this question is, what does HTTPS add to data that make it different from HTTP? Speed, authentication only, encryption using TLS, authorization. Which one is the answer? And the answer is C. Encryption. HTTPS encrypts data in transit using TLS. And that's why it is HTTPS, secure HTTP. Okay? Because it encrypts data in transit. Question number 17. Which port is used by HTTPS by default? Is it port 21, 80, 443, 8080? The answer is C. Port 443 is reserved for HTTPS traffic. Question 18. What attack does HTTPS primarily prevent? What attack does HTTPS primarily prevent? SQL injection, IDOR, man in the middle, cross-site scripting. The answer is HTTPS prevents attackers from intercepting traffic. And that obviously is what? It prevents man in the middle attack. It prevents man in the middle attack. Because in man in the middle attack, the attacker intercepts or standing between the client and the server to intercept the request from the client. And when that request is already encrypted by the client side, then it becomes useless for the attacker that is standing in between as man in the middle. But if the client side sends the request in plain text, as in the case of HTTP protocol, then the attacker can easily intercept and read the requests from the clients. So, question number 19. Can HTTPS prevent logic flaw? Yes or no? The answer is no. HTTPS only protects data in transit, not application logic. So it is only preventing data that is in transit. It's only protecting data that is in transit. It does not, HTTPS has nothing to do with the application logic, how the application runs, the processes, and other important operations of the application itself. So, to learn more about this, the video titled Authentication Basics, Login Flows, Common Weaknesses, and Bob Suite Testing by Dr. Ayodenuga is what you should watch. You will have a clear picture of why this question was asked. And it is good that security professionals, security analysts understand this. Risk professionals, it is important that they understand that HTTPS only protects data in transit, not application logic. Also, developers, this knowledge is very essential. Okay, question number 20. What happens if sensitive data is sent over HTTP? A, it is encrypted. B, it is saved internally. C, it can be intercepted. D, it is hashed. What is your option? C, HTTP traffic is plain text and easily intercepted. I've just explained it in the previous question, and it's repeated here in another way. Now, section number 3, HTTP methods. Let's which HTTP method retrieves data? Which one retrieves data? Is it the get, post, put, or delete? Which one? Is it the put method that retrieves data, or is it the delete method, or is it the post, or the get? Which one? Right, the answer is get. Get is designed for data retrieval. There is a video on HTTP method deep dive. You need to watch it. It addresses the different methods, what they are, and even their how you can remember each of them, what each of them does. Is well and clearly explained in that video. So let's continue. Which method is commonly used for login forms? You want to log in into an application, which method is used? Get, post, delete, options. Remember that get is used for retrieving data. So which option? Get, post, delete, option. The answer is post. Post sends credentials in the request body. So watch the video HTTP methods deep dive, how HTTP determines who wins, you or attacker. We move on to question number 23. What is method tampering? Changing headers, changing cookies, changing HTTP methods, changing IPs. What is your option? The answer is C. Attacker change HTTP methods to bypass controls. So it is changing HTTP method. That is what is called method tampering. It is not about cookies. It has nothing to do with the header or the IP address. It has to do with the HTTP method. Changing get to post or post to push, things like that. That is what is referred to as method tampering. Question number 24. Which tool is best for testing method tampering? You want to test whether your web application is susceptible or is vulnerable to method tampering. What tool will you use? Wireshark, Bob Repeater, Nmap, Metasploit. What is your option? The answer is B. Bob Repeater allows manual modification and replay. That capability of the Bob Repeater what makes it excellent for such operation. So, question number 25. Authorization should depend on HTTP method, URL only, server-side checks, client-side validation. Is it on method? You need to first understand what authorization is. Also, what is authentication? Then you'll be able to answer this. So let's look at the answer. HTTP method, A. B. URL only, C. Server-side checks, and D. Client-side validation. The answer is C. Authorization must always be enforced on the server side. If you are following this question and answer, you will know we have done something like that. On this question, it's like testing you on that same question again, but in another format. Now we're going to section 4, Bob suite. What is Bob proxy used for? Scanning ports, intercepting HTTP traffic, cracking passwords, writing exploits. What's your option? The answer is Bob proxy intercepts browser traffic. B as intercepting HTTP traffic. Okay. Question number 27. What does sending a request to repeater allow? Automation, manual testing, scanning, logging only. What is your option? Answer is B. Repeater is used for manual testing. Repeater is used for manual testing. Why install Bob's CA certificate? Why? Speed, HTTPS interception, authorization, login, login. The answer is it allows decryption of HTTPS traffic. B, which is HTTP interception. So it allows the interception and decryption of HTTPS traffic. So what happens is that with Bob Sweet certificate CA, Bob will use the CA to create and sign transport layer security certificate for each host that the proxy intercepts. So you know, once you open the proxy, you have your browser. So any request you make through that browser will be signed by the CA, by the Bob Sweet CA, to make it legitimate and make it acceptable to the client and the server, rather. Now, question number 29. Which Bob tool automates payload testing? Which Bob suite automates payload testing? Proxy, repeater, intruder, decoder. The answer is C, intruder. That's the one that automates attack. That's the one that is using brute force and other automated attack. 30. What is a common Bob beginner mistake? Using intruder, forgetting intercept on, forgetting intercept off, using HTTPS. What is a common Bob beginner mistake? So if you are a beginner in using Bob Suite, then you have to watch out for this answer so that you don't make this mistake, or if you have been making the mistake, so that you can actually put it to heart and correct it now. Answer, leaving intercept on. That is the answer. It breaks browsing. When you leave the intercept on, you will not be able to continue to browse because traffic coming from the browser is intercepted. So it will not get to the request will not go to the server. Server cannot respond, so there cannot be complete communication between the client and the server. So you just see, in most cases, you just see that the browser runs into a loop, continuous loop. And you begin to wonder as a beginner that what's going on. But if you are an experienced user of Bob Suite, even if you forget, once you get to the browser and you see what is happening, you'll be able to understand that the browser, that the intercept is on. That is why. So you quickly go ahead and turn it off. So, section 5, cookies, sessions, and JWT. What is JWT? What is a session ID? Is it a password? A, password. B, a server-side identifier. C, a browser token. D, a database key. What is a server? What is a session ID rather? B, session IDs map users to server-side session. So the user made a request and the server creates a session and creates a connection with the client. So that session, it opens a session for the clients to be able to continue to make requests. Otherwise, if there's no session ID, the client will make a request once and the browser will close. The opportunity to make another request, the browser, you have to maybe refresh your browser or do something like that. Same thing with any web application that you want to. Otherwise, you will have to maybe log in. Once you make one request, you come back and log in again. So to prevent that, that's why you have a session ID. The session ID creates a continuous reference to the server, a continuous reference of the client to the server. So the server knows it is still the same client that is making another request within this session that I've opened. Okay, so we'll continue. Question 32. Where are cookies stored? Server, database, browser, firewall. Even if you are not tech savvy, I expect everyone to get this right because we all use web browser and we come across cookies. So obviously we will say that it lives on the server, database, browser, or firewall. Firewall does not even come into web application. It's in the family of network. So the answer is C. Cookies are stored in the browser. Cookies are stored in the browser. What does HTTP only prevent? Does it prevent cross-site request forgery, CSRF, cross-site scripting, cookie theft, IDOR, insecure direct object reference, brute force? Which one does it prevent? HTTP only. What is your option? The answer is B. It prevents a JavaScript access. That is cross-site scripting, cookie theft. Okay. B is the answer. Then, question number 34. What is session fixation? What is session fixation? Reusing session IDs, stealing cookies, encrypting sessions, logging out users. What is session fixation? Is it the reusing of session IDs, stealing cookies, encrypting sessions, or logging out users? The answer is A. Attackers force victim to use a known session ID. That is what is called session fixation. The attacker already have a session ID that he has stolen or that he created to manipulate the traffic from the victim. So it forces the victim to use that session ID. So it's able to monitor what traffic is flowing in and out from the victim. So 35, question 35. What is a major JWT risk? Encryption, ties, trusting client's claim, expiration. What is a major JWT risk? What is JWT? Java Web Token. So it is what? Encryption, ties, trusting client claims, expiration. The answer is C. JWT claims must always be validated on the server side. So to understand more about this, especially about JWT and other means by which web applications maintain session, secure session, and others, watch the video How Attackers Manipulate Cookies, Sessions, and Token Web Application Security. Okay? You will see it in our live section or in the playlist Network and Web Security. Right. So the link, look at the description below. You will see the link in the description. The link to that, to the playlist. Okay. Section 6, SOP and CORS. What defines an origin? Domain only, IP only, scheme, host, port, URL path. What is the answer? The answer is C. All three must match to be same origin: scheme, host, and port. And the video reference for that is Same Origin Policy and CORS Explained: How Browsers Enforce Web Security. Look at check it in the link. 37. Who sends the CORS request? Server, browser, firewall, proxy? Who? The answer is B. The browser sends the origin header. 38. Who sends CORS response header? The browser, client, server, proxy. The answer is C. The server. See? The server decides allowed origins. So it is the server that will allow which origin is able to access resources. That is, which maybe third-party domain that is allowed to access resources, especially when you're using the API. Okay? 39. What is a pre-flight request? What is a pre-flight request? Post, get, options, head. The answer is C. Browser sends options before risky requests. So the browser sent a quick request to check and validate whether a particular or a suspected request should be sent. Then the server send back whether to send it or not. Is CORS a security boundary? Yes or no? B. CORS is browser enforced, not attack proof. So it's not, you can see, no. It is not attack proof. It's just a control within browser server communication. Then the last section, authentication and authorization. Let's go. Authentication verifies what? What does authentication verifies? Permissions, identity, roles, objects. And the answer is authentication answers who are you. So go to as B. Authorization verifies what? Identity, password, permissions, session. What does authorization verifies? If authentication verifies identity, what does authorization verifies? The answer is C. Authorization answers what can you do. So it is responsible for permissions. What does IDOR stand for? Mentioned it earlier. What does IDOR stand for? Internal Data Object Request, Insecure Direct Object Reference, Identity Data Override, Index Data Object Request. What is the answer? The answer is B. IDOR is an access control flaw. It is an acronym for Insecure Direct Object Reference. What causes IDOR? Weak password, missing ownership checks, open ports, CSRF. What is the answer? The server fails to verify object ownership. That's B. The answer is B. Missing ownership checks. So if the server fails to check the ownership of a basket and someone else can have access to their basket to check to see what user A puts in his or her basket, that means the server has failed to verify the object ownership. So that gives access to users, users access to objects they should not ordinarily have access to. Question number 45. Does authentication prevent IDOR? Yes or no? Authentication is not equal to authorization. Not the same thing. Proper authorization protects from IDOR. So if you detect IDOR, it is authorization that is faulty. It's not authentication. You could have a very good authentication in place, yet when users log in, then they can move around, access resources they should not have access to because of poor authorization. 46. RBAC. grants access based on A, attributes, B, objects, C, roles, D, tokens. What's the answer? The answer is roles. C, Hardback uses roles like admin or user to assign or to grant permission. ABAC grants access based on what? Roles only, attributes and context, URLs, tokens. What is your best option? What is the correct answer? The answer is B. ABAC evaluates multiple attributes. So it uses attributes and context. Attributes and context. Question number 48. Which tool is best for IDOR testing? Intruder, repeater, scanner, decoder. Which tool in Bob Suite? Let me put it that way. Which tool in Bob Suite is best for IDOR testing? Intruder, repeater, scanner, decoder. The answer is repeater. That's where you can modify the header, the request header, before sending it to the server. Question number 49. Which response confirms IDOR? If you modify the request header and you send it to the server, and the server returns 403 or 401 or 200 with other user data, or when the server returns 500, which one confirms there is IDOR? The answer is C. Unauthorized data exposure confirms IDOR. When the server sends back 200, 200 means okay. So it sends it means access is granted. And that exposes users' data. So that is the answer. Ordinarily, if you modify the request header and you send it to the server, it should return the 401, 403, whichever way, but not 200. Once it returns 200, it means you already have access and the data is already exposed, meaning that you have access to the data of other user, of another user, which is a clear indication of IDOR. The last question: where should authorization check occur? In the browser, client-side JavaScript, server-side, CDN? Which one is where should the authorization check occur? And the answer is the C, which is server-side. Client-side checks can be bypassed. You know that. We've talked about how it can be intercepted. So server-side is the correct option. And that brings us to the end of this 50 question and answer on web application security, covering the various topics I have treated in the past 1 or 2 weeks on web application security. You do yourself good by going into the link in the description. That's the link to the playlist for web application security videos, and listen to the videos to have detailed explanation of each concept. Thank you. Don't forget to join the membership, subscribe, and like the video. I bring another important and educational content your way very soon. Look out.